Welcome to the Empathic Mastery Show. I'm your host, Jennifer Moore, and I'm so glad you're here. This is a place where we talk about what it means to be highly sensitive and empathic, how this impacts all aspects of our lives, and we explore tools, resources, and solutions so we can shift from absorbing all the thoughts, feelings, and energy of the world around us to being beacons for calm, love, and healing. Hey there, everybody. I am really honored and delighted to be airing this podcast and to be sharing this conversation with all of you. When I first met Cherie Burton on her podcast, I knew as I was talking with her that I had to bring her here. And so I just can't wait to have this conversation and to share it with all of you. Cherie Burton is a soul work practitioner who specializes in the science and spirituality of multi-sensory healing and feminine empowerment. She's been trained in multiple healing art forms and modalities, having journeyed through several sacred feminine wisdom tradition apprenticeships and mystery schools. Cherie has been a life coach for over 20 years, holds a psychology degree, and has worked in clinical settings as a mental health counselor. She knows her stuff, people. Her Stand, Speak, Shine podcast, online programs, and retreats guide women to connect to their authentic essence and experience deep transformation and inner awakening. And the thing that isn't included in this bio, but is a big piece of what we are talking about today, is Cherie's own personal journey of deconstructing and decolonizing herself from the Mormon church and what life has been like growing up as a seventh generation Mormon and making the decision to claim her own spiritual path. Cherie, I am beyond grateful to have you here. I am so excited. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you, Jennifer. I love our association and feel really safe in sharing my story in this space.
I am so glad. So I always love to start at the very beginning and talk about just, did you know you were a sensitive kid? Did you know that you had special abilities? Like, what was it like for you? When did you realize that you were an empath? If you identify with that word, let's just start, tell us a bit about yourself.
Yeah. So I was always I think it's INFP on the Myers-Briggs, very introverted. I mean, I had a lot of friends and I played and whatever, raised between two sisters, 1 year older, 2 years younger. And I was just that stable, sensitive type. Stable meaning that I have orient from a practical side. I think in order to protect the deep intuition and my heart, which I didn't realize till later, but my mom said when I was 3-4 years old, somebody would knock on the door and my sisters would go bolt for the door and I would run behind my mom or I'd run into another room because I was reading intention. I was reading energy. I was, and so I've had several instances in my life where I'd be with my friends or something and somebody would pull over and say, do you want to ride? And I would get a clear no. And they would just run and get in the car. And those kind of things would happen. And I just had a keener, sense of people's intentions. And it was both a burden and a blessing, I guess you could say.
Yes.
It affected me in a lot of ways.
Yes.
But it also made me very much retreat into my own heart and put heart walls up at the same time. And so being a deep filler, I'm also a quad right being in human design. Mm-hmm. So I'm highly receptive. And so I didn't know all this till later, of course, but it's been very affirming coming into adulthood, knowing why I did what I did as a child to protect myself.
Yeah. Well, and you had commented in something that you're a projector in human design. Hello, projectors unite. Yeah.
Oh, yay.
Yeah. Nothing like being a projector and being highly sensitive. Yeah. So
great combo, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It is. I sort of, which came first, the chicken or the egg with that. And so I love how you were really acknowledging that in many ways, this really served you as much as it challenged you, even as a very young kid, because you recognized your boundaries and you recognized your limits. And you didn't get yourself into situations. I, on the other hand, I'm like an ANFJ. And so the difference between that P and that J, when it comes to the Myers-Briggs, I had a tendency to be kind of like, sure, and just jump into things that later I'd be like, yeah, that was a boneheaded move on your part. Sorry you did that. But let's talk about the church. Let's talk about let's go there. Let's go there. Let's go there.
Yeah, well, I will tell you that when I was 9 years old, and I need to preface this with, there are so many beautiful aspects to this religion, to Mormonism, yes. Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. There's so many fond memories. Mormons are really great at community, but the shadow side of that is, we'll get into that. But just beauty and goodness. But when I was 9 years old, I was at church one day and somebody brought up the word polygamy. And it wasn't a peculiar enough word that I was like, what is that? But when they said it, something happened to the middle of my body. So I asked my teacher, what is that? What is that? Oh, polygamy is it's this thing where, men marry many women, and then in the afterlife, so according to Mormon theology, well, it was practiced in the early church. It was abused. It's been a stain, you could say, on Mormon history, and the world doesn't know what to do with it. It's just a very peculiar thing that Mormons believe it will be practiced in the afterlife. It's called the new and everlasting covenant of marriage. So that was explained to me in Mormon, like in 9-year-old vernacular. And as soon as it was explained to me, that feeling in the middle of my body, it was like a punch. It was, or like someone kicked me in my midsection. And I had a very strong reaction to it. And I wouldn't unpack it for 40 years after that.
Wow.
That's how long it took. But it was something inside of me that I couldn't reckon with, justify. It very much demeaned the feminine. I couldn't understand why a God would want several women to one man, because that just seemed like it devalued the eternal station of women. And so my whole quest from that point on was to understand what is an empowered female, you could say exalted being in the afterlife compared to what I'm being told men are. And yes. It was very, very, it just created a huge wrestle within me, even though I was extremely faithful. It was on the shelf.
Yeah.
It was, it just I couldn't reconcile it.
Yeah. My mom was raised Catholic, and her experience, like there were these moments when I think one of the things for her, when her father died, she was like only 14 and he was not Catholic. So they wouldn't hold a mass for him. And my mother could not reconcile that. And I think sometimes as children and young, like tweens and even young teenagers, there's this way in which the things that people who've just been going along to get along just hear and just accept as truth. But as a young person, you're like, this doesn't like, it's, you can see it in a way that the adults just can't. Yeah.
Right. It's very visceral.
Yeah.
Because our logic brain isn't fully developed.
No.
We can only go off of how it feels or lands.
Yeah.
I did all the good things that a good Mormon girl does my entire life. I served a mission, a full-time mission. Anyway, there's what they call the covenant path in Mormonism. So you get baptized at age 8, you get the gift of the Holy Ghost right after your baptism. So it's kind of like a confirmation. Then the next step is that you get married or get your temple endowments. You go through a temple ritual in a sacred temple. And usually that is because you're going on a mission or getting married. And then the next step is you do get married, and that's done in a temple ritual. And then after that, you continue to take the weekly sacrament at church, which is considered a sacred ordinance. And then you try to live a good life and progress and grow. And in theory, it's it's actually, it sets you apart from the world, let's just say. So it can be a really beautiful path to just kind of consecrate yourself. But there were aspects to the covenant path that began to feel bureaucratic, regimented, very patriarchal, very much leaving women out of any kind of authority, voice, contribution at the highest levels, especially. There's a hierarchy at play with the priesthood. And so I had these feminist leanings, and I couldn't, again, justify a God that I was being told was just inclusive and loved everyone and not include women in policy, administration, leadership to the degree that men were.
Yes.
And it created a real rift inside of me. I will share this one experience that I shared with you, Jennifer, that I'm more and more open about. When I got off my mission, and it wasn't common for when I'm 50, almost 50, well, I'm 55 now when this airs. It was not common at that time for girls to serve missions. Usually the boys, when they turn 19, 18 years old, they go and serve a 2-year mission. But for girls, that was less common. And I decided to do that. I've always had a heart of devotion, and I love people, and I love Christ, and I wanted to serve. So I go on a mission to Texas. I come home. Really great experience overall. There were some really not healthy aspects to serving a mission, which we can get into later. But overall, it was a good experience. I come home. I go to Brigham Young University, which is a very stereotypical Mormon thing to do. Go home, go to BYU. And fast forward through a series of unfortunate events, I ended up getting together with a guy who was not LDS. He was not a member of the faith, although he did convert while we were dating. And I ended up getting pregnant. I was 25 years old. And because so in the Mormon faith, this is really emphasized in the temple, that the law of chastity, meaning no sexual relations outside of marriage, is akin to murder. Like it's way up there in sins. It's way, way up there, like beyond most other sin, but almost every sin but murder. And so because I had taken out my temple covenants, gone on a mission and gotten, back and did this and had taken out these sacred covenants and broke the law of chastity, and this pregnancy means that this child would not be born, quote unquote, in the covenant, because I wasn't going to marry this guy. We had a really tumultuous, unhealthy relationship. And my bishop actually brought out the church handbook to me when I was in about my 3rd or 4th month of pregnancy. I was very repentant. I was going to him to be forgiven of my sins and get over this and move on and repent. But here I am in this pregnancy, right? And I wasn't going to get an abortion. I mean, that would be like, more. So I was like, I'm going to carry this child to term. I only have 1 year of college left, but I'm 25. I can do this. And my bishop brought out the handbook, and he read this section to me that basically said, if there are no plans for the mother and father to marry, that the child deserves to be in a temple covenant home, and that the birth mother should make plans to place her child specifically with LDS family services. And when he read that to me, I mean, that's like coming from God. So if this is in the official handbook representing God's official church and God's official view on these situations, I can't say that the bishop was forcing my hand, but it was very, very much emphasized and urged that I consider adoption. And so I went with that, and
how could you not?
Yeah.
I mean, it's like you're looking at scripture that's like the word of God here. You already broke a rule, or you broke the law, and you're trying to desperately to get back on the right path and you are being completely repentant. I can't even imagine how I could do anything else, except I'm thinking, what a miracle that you had the self-esteem and the wherewithal and the boundaries to know that marrying this guy was not an option. It wasn't even on the table. Because I imagine there are so many women who would have gone in that direction instead. Yeah.
Absolutely. In fact, that was the first thing. Yeah. You play, you pay kind of thing.
Right. Get married.
You should get married. And I was actually really close to marrying the guy. And I finally just had a moment of clarity of it. I can't. He wasn't a safe person, number one, and he wouldn't have been a safe father. So I went with this plan, and I don't share this from a victim standpoint because I very much felt like it was part of my lesson to have this experience to place my baby for adoption. And it was a very open adoption, and I got to choose the family. I kind of rebelled a little bit and didn't go with LDS social services to place this child. That I made a very careful and thoughtful adoption plan. And I will say, I had a C-section. There's a whole thing around it. It was I had never experienced grief like that. I had never remotely come close to feeling so much love for a human, for another being, and being her mother. And then 3 days later, in the hospital, signing the papers, because I fully believe that was, in a way, a penance for my mistake, but also it was part of her soul path. And I need to back up a little bit. Mm-hmm. So after the bishop counseled me to place her for adoption, when I was about 5 months along, I got a letter saying that I was being summoned to a church disciplinary council. They're called, God. Yeah. So they don't call them that anymore. They softened the term disciplinary to membership so that your membership's on the line, right? So I had already made an adoption plan. I was already penitent, and I hadn't messed up I was being good. And I get this letter, and I met with my bishop, and he said, yeah, we need to do, this is serious. Like you've had your temple endowments. You broke the law of chastity. We just need to convene a priesthood council. So they did. So there were no women present. It was after hours. The church was dark. It was just these men in a room waiting for me with my pregnant belly and my burgeoning breasts. And I'm a single girl with no advocate with me. You do it slightly different now. You can bring a woman with you now. But it was very invasive. I was asked, why did you take your temple garments off? Because when you go through the Mormon temple endowment ceremony, you get sacred undergarments, and they're to protect you. So what was I thinking taking those off? And did I enjoy it? And why was I doing this? And it was just like, I don't know. I guess I'm a real sinner. I didn't think or have the wherewithal to say I'm a human 25-year-old woman who has a natural, natural human sexual desire, that it was very shaming. So what happened was I told my story. I answered all of their questions. All eyes were on me. I was in a complete hot seat. I've never been more humiliated in my life and full of shame, even though I felt sustained by what I believe was the spirit, and that it was like this in spite of that, not because of it. They call them courts of love, but they're courts of shame, straight up. They're medieval. Mm-hmm. They shouldn't be doing it. Mm-hmm. So I go out in the hall so they can deliberate about my fate. And while I was in the hallway, while they were praying what to decide to do with me, I was bargaining with God. I now recognize that was a spiritual trauma that I was going through in rapid fire succession, the stages of death. Yeah. Bargaining with God, depression, like anger, like it all just went in that hallway for I don't know how many minutes, maybe 15 or 20. They call me back in. Oh, and by the way, I had told God, just don't, you can take my firstborn. You can take everything. Do not take my membership in this church. This is everything to me. Just like you can have it all. I know I'm a horrible person. I'll do whatever you say. Just don't take my membership. I go back into the room, and these men are kind of like, they're all in suits. It's very patriarchal, right? They're all just, and I'm there in my dress, and they're saying, well, the one who was sort of presiding said, well, we want you to know this was really hard for us. And the Lord in his mercy has decided not to excommunicate you. And I was like, oh, phew. And then the next breath he said, but we really feel like we need to disfellowship you. So disfellowship, so excommunication means you lose your membership entirely. Like,
yeah, you're no longer a Mormon. Yeah.
You're no longer a Mormon. You're no longer a member. Disfellowship is just a little step down from that. You're still able to retain your membership, but you can't participate. So you can't pray in church. You can't have a service capacity or a church calling. There's a myriad of things. You can't take the sacrament. So I was just kind of like, oh, okay, I'll take it. That's great. I'm still a member. But that all happened while I was still pregnant, that they did say the fact that you have followed the Lord's counsel to place this child for adoption in a temple covenant home is one of the reasons we're not excommunicating you, basically. So it was very much like, okay, you get my baby. That's kind of the energy of like, you're getting my baby. You're in exchange for this membership thing. So I took it all. I was very humbled. I was very grateful. I left, and it was very hard to participate in church after that because it was very shameful.
Yeah.
I avoided it. I didn't want people to see I wasn't taking the sacrament. I didn't want people to see that I couldn't pray if I was called on to pray, to open a meeting. Like, I wasn't worthy. I was not worthy to raise this child, and I was not worthy to participate in church. So
I mean,
it was very, very, yeah.
All you needed was a scar. I mean, it's like the only thing missing from this was a big A embroidered on your shirt.
Yes. The Scarlet Letter, it was absolutely, and I know you know this, Jennifer, because you're very, familiar with the Magdalene, but that was what would later draw me into the Magdalene and Mary Magdalene's, because path and her, how she comes in, like, as she was the penitent whore. She was deemed this by the church for millennia. And it hasn't been until just the last, 50, 40, 30 years.
Yeah, I think she finally, I think they finally, acknowledged her sometime, I think in the 90s or something.
Actually, 1969.
Okay.
That was 1969. That was the year I was born.
Yeah.
The Pope at the time came out and said basically, like, sorry, she wasn't a whore. She wasn't a prostitute. But that experience followed me throughout the remainder of my life. So it was gut wrenching to place her. I made sure that I was going to not ever do anything like that again. And that I was going to do all the things on the covenant path. I was going to get married. I was going to have children. I was going to, serve in the church until the day I died. And I met my husband actually when my daughter was only 3 months old. And we got married in the temple. But in order for us to get married in the temple, they had to reconvene that same disciplinary council with those same men and basically kind of make sure that I was still worthy so that I could get married in the temple. And then my fiance, Jeff, had to come in at some point and vouch for my worthiness and say that I was being chaste and that we were being chaste. And he was serving as a witness for my character. And had I not been reinstated from that experience, that second disciplinary council, we would not have been able to get married in the temple. And that was a non-negotiable for me. Yeah. My entire life, I was like, I am getting married in the temple. So we did get married in the temple. I was reinstated. We started, and the next thing on the covenant path for a woman is to have as many children as she possibly can. And so I did. I had 5 more children. Well, I had 3 more children, 4 miscarriages in a row after that, and then adopted 2 children later in life. So a total of 6 children. And I just need to add, because everyone's curious about what happened. So my daughter, her name is Wendy, my oldest daughter that I placed for adoption. And her middle name is Cherie, after me. They named her middle after me. And we've had, she's now 30 and are turning 30 really soon. And she's a mother herself of 3 young ones. She was also on the covenant path because she went into a temple covenant home, but she divested herself. She had a private awakening all on her own and left the church, really closely in sync to the time I did, but we weren't sharing notes about it. We just have that parallel journey. So she's got 3 little boys. She's doing amazing. We're really close. And we've had a very full circle relationship trying to deconstruct all of this and to make sense of our lives. And so it's been a really beautiful full circle thing for her to come back and be a part of my life and my family's life.
Mm. Wow. What a journey. And we're only talking about the first, it's like, this is the first chapter. This isn't even,
it's there's another
journey.
Incident that happened that pretty much rocked my entire foundation.
Yeah.
But that set it up, that in my 20s, that experience set it up for just like, be quiet, capitulate to what is you are told you are and what you did, and all. Like, don't rock the boat too much. You're going to make God angry. You're going to ruffle the feathers of the priesthood. So just obey. So in Mormonism, obedience is the first law under heaven, not love, obedience. So obedience to the authority and to what God is saying in Scripture, which is, as you know, largely open for interpretation, but
largely, yeah.
This is where dogma comes in. This is where doctrine and dogma come in. And for me, it was hard to sort them. But as you know, being an empath, when you hear something that's coming at you, like let's just say a doctrine, and you get this feeling like, oh, that there's something about that just doesn't. So I learned to override that feeling over and over and over and over until I just accepted the lion's share of what was given to me, because I would be unfaithful if I didn't.
Right.
And there's a lot of fear around that.
Right. As an empath, one of the things I've realized is, we don't just hear the words. We don't just get the social pressure that the average, your ordinary average bear is going to pick up. We also feel the will body, the internal, like the desires coming from the people around us, the will of those people, the energetic pressure. And so I think that it's not just about, even like I've seen when I was a kid, I remember growing up around a lot of kids raised Catholic. And I just remember how easily they could shake off being bad. Like they were just kind of like, an adult sort of gave them like a what's what and said, you're not being a good, you did something wrong. And I remember just seeing these children. And it doesn't necessarily not just Catholic, but any tradition, but just Catholic, because that is such a strict religion as well. But I remember marveling at like how they could just not feel guilty for disobeying the law.
I know.
And it's like, I really think there is a difference in being a highly sensitive empath in these kinds of very strict, as you said, high demand religions. That's what you called them, right? High demand high demand religions, that I think that as an empath, there's this incredible desire, but there's also this energetic, like you want so deeply to be in alignment with the energy that's being broadcast at you. Yes. And so we don't have that same like, whatever.
Oh, whatever. No, it's deep. It's like,
it's deep.
You take it seriously.
Yeah.
Because your mind, not just because you can feel it, but like the chain of events in your mind. If I don't do this, then this happens. And then I'm not with my family forever. And then if I'm not then I'm not with God forever. And then I'm alone. And then, so it hits on this primal fear of being alone eternally. Or alone without your loved ones. They're playing on that fear. And many of the people within the space, myself included, didn't pick up that because it's all cloaked in languages of love and benevolence. And, and you just don't go in your head to a place of that's malevolent. They're saying something so wrong in such a great, beautiful tone of voice. And how could that not be of God? Like, it must be me. I must be so rebellious and unfaithful that I can't accept this. And so you just play with the fear. It drives you.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that the love doesn't drive you in a religion. I'm not saying that you're not service-based and altruistic, but there's this shadow aspect that nobody really, I shouldn't say nobody, very few that are really in it will dive into the shadows. And I have compassion for that because I didn't do it till I was 49 years old. Fully looked at the shadows. I couldn't do it.
No, well, and it's baked in, there's so much socializing, there's so much conditioning, there's so much, there's so much, and like the whole system is predicated on the acceptance of certain beliefs. And so it's kind of like, as you said, it's like, it's a domino effect. If you do this, then ultimately what it always comes back down to is eternal exile into the void of oblivion, while everybody else, all the guys have their own planet and as many wives and children as they can possibly amass.
Yeah.
I mean,
Mormonism, the theological construct of Mormonism takes heaven. It's like heaven on steroids, multi-layers of heaven, like 3 degrees of glory. And then in the 3rd degree, or the highest degree of glory, there's 3 more. There's actually like 6 heavens. And to get to the tippy top, which everyone wants to shoot for, I'm an Enneagram 3, so I want to shoot for the highest thing. I'm a high achiever by nature. It's just tell me what to do and I'll do it.
Right.
So I wasn't about like, if I'm going to hit that highest degree of heaven and be exalted and be with God forever, there's things I need to do here. And like you said, I would look around and be like, why aren't we all taking this more seriously? Come on, people. That sounds really judgmental, but like, why can you go out and drink? Because Mormons do not drink coffee, tea, alcohol, tobacco, like it's all banned.
Mm-hmm.
There's a doctrine called the Word of Wisdom, and you do not consume those substances, period. But I knew Mormon couples and different people that were doing that stuff. And I'm like, how do you do that? Like,
right. How do you do that?
Like, bend with the guilt and the shame. And like, so anyway, I'm not saying I was perfect, but I took it seriously. I couldn't not and have mental health.
Right. Well, and interestingly, I think that, I'm thinking about my mother's experience, because in some ways I am the result of I'm a decolonized daughter. My mother left the church before I was born, but my mother was very devout. Like, one of my favorite stories about her was that apparently every single time she'd go by the church, like her school was next to the church, and every time she'd go by the church, she'd genuflect every single time she passed the church. And eventually, like, the Mother Superior brought her in and said, "Shirley, why are you genuflecting? You don't have to do that. Like, you don't have to keep doing this every single time you go in front of the church." But my mom had that same level of, like, she followed the letter of the law. And so when she got to be 21 and she started seeing the discrepancies and the hypocrisy, she couldn't reconcile it. Whereas I have all these other family members who stayed in the church because they could go drinking on Saturday night and go to church on Sunday. Like, there just wasn't that same sense of, like, of faithfulness. And I think, ironically, it's the people like you and my mom and me, if I had been raised in it, there's this level of faithfulness that makes it really hard to stay when you realize nobody else is playing by the same set of rules.
Right. Well, and what happened in 2005 was sort of the beginning of everything sort of shifting for me. So I was having dissonant feelings already.
Yeah.
I was putting them on a shelf to stay faithful. And I just immersed myself in my children, my church calling. And then I was also in the pageant. This is going to sound really almost like an oxymoron, but I was also in the pageant industry because I was doing Mrs. Pageants, and I was actually Mrs. Utah that year that this all happened, that what I'm about to tell you happened. So I was in media and different things. And I was just really kind of like finding my voice, because you can't have leadership in the church if you're a woman. Like, you can't be a bishop, or, you can't, sit at the highest councils and have input and stuff. So a lot of Mormon women will go find an avenue to express their spiritual gifts in a more validating way. Let's just say even outside the church. So that's one of the reasons I did Mrs. Utah. So I could just, have a community platform, polish myself, have a voice. And this is all subconscious, by the way. I didn't even know that that's why I was doing it. I'm still very faithful LDS. But that year that I was Mrs. Utah, my sister, who's 2 years younger, bipolar disorder, had an addiction issue with painkiller medication. I'm very devout Mormon, married to someone who works for the church, 5 children, the whole thing. She took her life. She went to a hotel room in Salt Lake City, wrote a note on the hotel stationery pad, and basically in essence, said that she could be a better guardian angel than she could be a mother, that she just couldn't do it anymore, and didn't want to break her temple covenants with her husband. And so told him to go on and get married because they were possibly facing divorce, but they were having some marital difficulties. And that experience, I was really close to her, and it really rocked my world. It absolutely blew up our family. It just absolutely brought us to our knees. And it's been, I've had some space around it. It's been, 19 years now.
Yeah.
But after that happened, I started having LDS women coming out of the woodwork, messaging me how depressed they were, how they felt like they could be vulnerable enough with me because of the way that I lost my sister. These are women that looked like they had it all together. Because in Mormonism, image is it's a very, you don't show your chinks in your armor. We were taught and conditioned and really groomed to put on a happy face and look happy and pleasant. And so there's a lot of mental illness. There's a lot of undiagnosed depression, and there's more awareness around it now. Back then, Utah was leading the nation in suicide.
Wow.
And so after I lost my sister, and because I was Mrs. Utah, they asked me to sit on the State Suicide Prevention Council. The Attorney General of Utah asked me to be a suicide survivor representative. And so I dove into it. Yeah, well, I dove into the shadow. Why is this happening in Utah? What is going on in this community, in this culture?
Yeah.
And I didn't have the words for it then, but it was toxic perfectionism.
Right.
Also, the LGBTQ, there have been rashes of suicides for those in that community.
Yeah.
Who really talk about me having dissonance around being a woman in the afterlife. Those who identify in the LGBTQ plus IA spectrum, it's worse for them. Let's just say that. Because the policies are not friendly to that population. And so anyway, it just opened my eyes to this sickness, this plague-like, everything's great on the outside, but there's so much going on underneath, and the unsustainability of that kind of motherhood, that kind of facade. So it took me another, I don't know how many years after that, probably 15 years before I could really lift the lid on that and really dive. When I started studying depth psychology and Jungian spiritual psychology and consciousness, and it's like, what's really going on here? And I've had to battle it.
Yeah.
I've had to battle my own depression and my own dysthymia around this perfectionism and trying to be 100% faithful and always feeling like you're letting God down. You're doing it wrong. You're getting it wrong. You're never going to be worthy enough. Keep trying, keep striving, keep being obedient. I mean, it's just absolutely exhausting.
Exhausting. Yeah. And it's relentless. And I think the thing is that nagging sense of feeling like you're missing the mark over and over and over again, because as a human being, we're just not capable of being perfect in that kind of way. So that constant feeling of I'm not doing it well enough.
Yeah.
Oh,
we were always taught to be humble. And that meant if anything was going on in your life, what did you do? What are you not doing? Are you reading your scriptures? Are you praying? Are you going to the temple? Have you repented of your latest sins? And if you are doing all of those things and you're still depressed, well, there's no explanation for that.
Right.
And so many people personalize this and make it about their worthiness.
Right.
That that's why they're depressed.
Right.
And that is exactly what happened to my sister. 100%. This is not something I deconstructed until later.
Yeah.
But through her journals and through some other channels of really like, what was going on with her? It was that. I'm not saying she didn't have a legit mental illness. She did. It was exacerbating it. And it was making it to where she just felt absolutely hopeless. I will never be enough for my children. My husband's better off without me. And yeah, so I didn't reckon with that part of it. I was only looking at the mental illness itself. So I became a mental health advocate, a suicide survivor advocate, mental health awareness. Then I shifted gears and went into holistic. And that has been my career, basically, is holistic emotional science and holistic health. And the whole thing with how we store, emotion in our bodies and how we internalize messages and how we fall prey to false programming, how susceptible we are, how we get indoctrinated, and how we are literally spellbound by these, traditions that are making us sick. So it wasn't until I started getting sick 15 years later, or much longer it was after that, 14 years actually, that I said, I've got to take polygamy off the shelf that I got punched with at age 9. I've got to take depression and mental illness off the shelf. My thyroid was failing me. All these things were happening to me. I was getting depressed. And so I did. I took a sabbatical and I allowed myself for the first time in my life to be disobedient. I'm using air quotes by studying, by looking at all angles and aspects, by studying the actual history of the foundations of Mormonism, not what was whitewashed and handed to us, but what actually happened through court affidavits, public records, etc. And then I looked at the dogma and how it was living in my body and how it was creating a lot of health. I sought out mentors. And I've told you this, Jennifer, you could take losing my firstborn daughter, losing my sister to suicide, which up to that point in my life. And I actually also walked in and found my grandfather dead. Take all of these losses that were so severe that they literally brought me to my knees and multiply them by about 15, 20. And you wouldn't even come close to the devastation, the fetal position, world paradigm exploding moment where I knew that a lot of what I was told was not what it was purported to be.
Yeah.
That, to use the church's words, because they like to make it all black and white. Either the church is true, it's not. Joseph Smith is a prophet, or he's not. The Book of Mormon is word of God, or it's not. Like, there's so much nuance there. And I allowed myself to sit in the nuance and the tension and the dark goddess, if you will, the mother, and just feel it all and realize, oh my goodness, this is based on illusion. And I have given my baby, my life, my sister's life has been lost. Countless people floundering, depressed, and making it about them instead of the system, instead of the dogma.
Right.
That moment was epically dark for me. And it was years of it, not just one moment.
No.
It took so much work to I'm still, like, it's been 5 years and I'm still deconstructing. I'm still looking at some of these, and not just within religious space, but what I've been taught my whole life about women, and what I've just taught my whole life about love and relationships. And it just goes on and on and on and on. Theology, and then also psychology. When I was to get this degree, there was a lot of it based on illusion. So anyway, it's just been absolutely so liberating, but so devastating.
Right.
These are my people. Mormons are my people. I still live in Utah. I still have family members that are active in the church. Yeah. I've said dear friends, business associates. This is where the universe has placed me.
Yeah.
And I believe being, I don't think called, maybe summoned, but there's a very deep yearning within me to tell the truth and to share my sister's truth and to be a voice for the voiceless, just like we learn about Mary Magdalene. That's what she did. And that's why she was my great emancipator in all of this. I had a mystical experience in France in 2018 following her trail. And I'd link everything back to that experience, because it was within 4 or 5 months that I gave myself that permission to lift the lid on Mormonism. And I trace it back to that event.
Could you tell us about that?
Yeah. So it was June of 2018. I had been called inside of me. They call it the call of the Magdalene, I guess, but I'd read everything I could get my hands on. Why am I so obsessed with this woman, Mary Magdalene? And I'm still in the church. I'm still trying to make it work. And so I started reading, and I probably have 20 books or more on Mary Magdalene. I started really climbing into the true history of Christianity, all that stuff. So I go to France, and it was absolutely like coming home in many respects. But one night I was alone in my room, and my roommate, it was the one night she wasn't there. And in the middle of the night, I was awakened, but I couldn't open my eyes. And I felt a very distinct presence, a very feminine presence. And I couldn't make out features, but I knew she had long dark hair. And it was fierce. It was like a fierce feminine presence, but it was also very loving, like just unapologetically, like fierce, loving, and fierce power. Because that's how she had to come through to me at the time. Had it been someone who was like coddling me and like, are you doing okay? Or anything like that, it wouldn't have resonated.
Mm-hmm.
But this is what I heard. What do you want? Cherie, what do you want? And no one has ever asked me that at church. No one.
Mm.
And I was like, oh. So I started just sharing the longings of my heart. Again, I can't move. I'm immobile. I can't open my eyes. But it was just so peaceful and so affirming. And so just rattle, health, all these beauty, my children, all these things. And then the last thing that I remember kind of spouting out, I just want the truth. I just want to know the truth. Mm-hmm. I need the truth. I need the real. I need it. I'm done with illusions. I'm done with false. So I felt my crown chakra open, and I was absolutely deluged with rushing, pulsating waves of light and power. And I'm still like integrating that experience. But what I have come to understand about that is that it came to me because of my deep desire to get to the heart of what was really going on in my community, and knowing that I have this heart of devotion to God, and that I love Christ, and I love the idea of what he was showing and teaching. And so it took his female counterpart, his divine cohort, if you will, to bring me into that space of the beloved in a way that I could really unequivocally say, that did not come from me. I did not imagine that. This is real. And I wish I could say that everything was great after that, because the dark night of the soul hit. Mm-hmm. That was the spark. That was the moment in my life that when I got home and got back into my life, that the dark night hit and I started questioning and lifting the lid. But I felt her presence. I felt this, like, you go, girl. You honor your inquisitive mind, your projectorness, whatever. Like, you go, and it's okay. And it was so cool, because I was always taught to stay away from these sources and don't read that and don't talk to this person, and fear.
Yeah.
And so anyway, yes. So it took about 4 years after that for me to really get that I can have my own inner authority, that I can claim myself as a sovereign, that we are all in this together. There is no hierarchy in the afterlife. We are one, and that they are spreading the biggest lie of all, which is this: we are never separate from God. There is nothing that we can do. We do not have to repent for our presence, our choices. Yes, we have to go and make reconciliation where it's appropriate.
Yeah.
But when it comes to our connection to our Creator, the fact that they are peddling that there is even on the table a slight chance that you are ever disconnected, it boils my blood now like nothing else, because it's a lie. Yeah. It's a lie. So that's where my passion goes with it. That's where my fierce feminine is now. Like, excuse me? I don't think so. I mean, I have children who were harmed by this. My oldest children who were in the system. My youngest two, we've not had them baptized. And I can see the difference in how they feel about themselves.
Yes. Oh, Cherie, what an amazing, amazing journey. And as you said, like, you've been through it. You've experienced some real trauma. We're not talking like ABC after school special, sugar-coated version of it. You've really been through it. And as you were saying, like, the choice to leave the church was like 20, not even, like, more than 20 times as intense. And I just really want to acknowledge the incredible level of courage that I know it took to be able to do what you've done, and to be where you are today, and to be having this incredibly raw, real, frank conversation. Thank you so much for sharing your truth. And for sharing about, I'm always so grateful. Anytime as human beings, we start peeling away the veneer of like, excuse my language, bullshit of like, we've got it all together and we're like, we've got it all figured out. And, and just all of it, but especially when it becomes this toxic perfectionism that literally kills people. And I've heard people because I went to seminary, and one of the things that I was interesting was how within the high demand churches in particular, there's this separation, like mental health and spirituality get separated and pulled apart. And a lot of times it's like the church alone should be able to be the answer to all your problems. It's like you don't go talk about. And it's so sad to me because it's like God created these things too. And yet there's a way in which so many people just like coast along in their misery until they just crash because of the pressure to never question and the pressure to be, quote, obedient, unquote. And even the definition of obedience. When I was in seminary, one of the things that I learned was that the roots of the word obedience means to lend your ear to. It's about the ability to hear, the ability to listen.
That definition.
Yeah. And when I learned when I came to understand what true obedience is about being in alignment with and listening to the divine. That's what true obedience is. But it's gotten co-opted by this patriarchal supremacy bullshit that's all about, the hierarchy of the guy in the sky, and then everybody else that, trickles down in the pyramid. Yeah. And like who's down and like the idea of obedience basically being, it's not about listening. It's about capitulating. So, right. Yeah.
And that's part of the other part of it that gets really, I believe, sinister now is co-opting Jesus, like what he was really doing and sharing and teaching versus what the patriarchy is saying that, and part of it is like, you're making Jesus suffer more when you do bad things, or like, because he took on the sins of everybody, which that's kind of like a mystical mystery. Nobody really understands that.
Right.
Even if you're deeply Christian, like no one can really explain it.
Right.
People have tried.
Yeah.
But despite that, I think a lot of it is allegorical. I think a lot of it is symbolic for each one of us.
Yeah.
That we have to become crucified to our old self, to our old ideologies, constructs, illusions, falsehoods. Then we have to literally die, just like the myth of Inanna, where she goes under descends to the underworld. She dies, is hung on a meat hook for 3 days. These texts predate the Bible. These are Sumerian texts. These are the earliest texts we have. So she dies, and then after the third day, she rises and she comes up to, these are all very, very feminine myths. And they've been co-opted by the patriarchy. And then Jesus got thrown into it and became all about this like, I'll be your mediator with God. However, like it's just a mind warp, because you don't know, like, am I okay? Like, am I worthy to have the Spirit right now? And then like, I contributed to Jesus's pain on the cross and in the Garden of Gethsemane. And so is he mad at me, or like, are we good now? Like, is this good? Or are we okay? And so for me, it was, I told you this, but that's just the word beloved, being a beloved of God, having a beloved divine partner. I actually have a tattoo that says beloved now, and it has a rose, because this is after my deconstruction, because Mormons aren't supposed to get tattoos. But it was just so important to give myself the mark of the rose, literally, and to have this word beloved, because to me, that's at the heart of it. When I parse it all out and I just get down to the depths of and core of my deepest heart's longing, and I'm talking womb, the heart of my womb, the heart of my heart and my mind, everything, all the cells in my body, it's to have union with the beloved.
Yes.
I don't need someone at the gate. And even Jesus said that. Jesus said, I employ no servant at the gate. It's just us and him.
Mm-hmm.
It's just us and her. And to give myself, to like get the courage to give myself that permission took years after my dark night. Even it's still like in me to have this heart of devotion, to serve humanity, to embody Sophia, to have Sophia Christ conscious, whatever you call it. It's just alive in me now. And Mary Magdalene knew that, or whoever that was that came to me. I really feel it was Mary Magdalene, but it might've been my higher self with her, but it was Mary Magdalene. And she knew that in order for me to have my heart's greatest desire, which is union with the beloved and to know truth, I had to die. I had to let everything go. And it was absolutely worth it. Very excruciating. Like I said, it's taken me this long to have the courage to share my story. And then I'm writing my story in a book, which will be out. But I feel clear that it's from love. It's not from burn it down anger. It's truly from a place of love.
Yes.
Tough love.
Tough love and truth, and truth lovingly expressed and shared. I mean, love is the answer. Love is what's going to turn the ship around. More condemnation, more anger, more like finger pointing is not where the solution lies. The solution lies in coming home to love and coming home to knowing we are all beheld in God, that we are all beloved of the divine. Oh, Cherie, this story is amazing. I could talk with you for hours and hours and hours. And we're at that point where it's like we're coming up to that top of the hour. And so I want to be sure to give you a chance to say anything else that just feels really, really important.
It feels like there are people that might need to hear a voice of reason and an anchor into, maybe they're in the dark night. Maybe they're in a place where they're sort of on this precipice of, okay, do I jump? And what happens if I do? And what if I'm wrong? What if they're right? What if all the systems are right and I'm wrong? Even though my body is saying, I want this union. I want to feel this. So if that's any of your listeners, which I've been there multiple times, I would just say your heart is gold. You have everything that you need to thrive and live and love just in your own being, irrespective of your community, your systems, your family, religion, your academia, whatever, any group you're in. You are enough just in and of yourself in accessing that divine intelligence because you are the beloved. And if anyone tells you anything different than that, they're lying to you. You have been deceived, paradoxically. So rest into who you actually are, which is a divine soul here to learn love, here to embrace love in all its forms. I am not mad at the patriarchy anymore. I hate the ideology, but I love the people that have been perpetuating it because they are steeped in tradition and they do not know any different. Many of them, some of them do, but I'm not going to be the one that judges or condemns because I don't know what they've walked through. I do know this. I'm done with power structures and authorities trying to co-opt or, like you say, colonize the soul. So I think that your listeners are probably deep enough to just let that wash over them, let that sink in. I know my listeners hear it from me all the time, and I can't say it enough. We have to be reminded of this all of the time.
All the time.
Otherwise, we will be part of the fear matrix.
Right. Well, and fear is contagious. Fear is, even though it's a lower vibration, it is a powerful one. So coming back to love again and again is so important. So Cherie, as I mentioned to you before, I always love to do this time travel exercise at the end of every podcast. And, I believe that podcasts exist in the ribbon of time. And it's like we throw a stone in the river of time and the ripples go back and forward. This will be heard for many years from now. And I also believe that the broadcast kind of we send messages back to parts of ourselves. And so what I love to do is take a moment to send a message, a transmission, like an actual broadcast, like you're going to talk to her and send a message back, rippling back to a point where you really needed it. So my questions are, who, when are you sending a message back to? Like what part of you is needing to hear this? When are we going back to? And what are you saying to her? Like, what is the message you're delivering to her?
What's coming forward for me is when I was a young mom. So after I placed my daughter for adoption, married my husband and started having our own family, I was breastfeeding. I was toddlers and babies and diapers and the whole thing. And I still carried so much shame from my past. Like if people really knew who I was, they really knew what I did in my past. And I was just trying so hard to be a good mom. Sorry, you're going to make me cry. Mm-hmm. Just to be good to God.
Yeah.
I would tell her, you know what, Cherie, someday you're going to understand why you have these feelings. It's going to make a lot of sense to you. It's like you're in the perfect place right now, in the middle of the throes of motherhood and shame and not being enough and feeling fat and feeling stretch marked and feeling all of these complexities, that there will come a time that you are truly free, that you are truly liberated from feeling less than. And it's not too far away. So you just rest into what you know, just love. You love those babies. You would do anything for those babies. So do that for yourself. Love yourself. Hold yourself. Mother yourself at the level you are loving and nurturing your babies. Feed yourself. Cradle yourself. And it will pay off in dividends. And your children are beautiful humans, young adult humans. Those babies right there, they're beautiful humans. That's what I would say to her.
Oh, and it did pay off. It really did.
It's still a work in progress, but yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
The path of liberation is where it's at.
It is. And sovereignty and being beheld, being the beloved. So Cherie, how do people get in touch with you? How do we find you?
The easiest place is just my website, cherieburton.com. I also have an Instagram account, cherie.burton. I have a community on Facebook called Stand, Speak, Shine. Stand, Speak, Shine. I say it too fast sometimes to be like, what? Stand, Speak, Shine community on Facebook. It's a private group. You get freebies for joining. I have a loop. So you mostly just follow me on those two places, on Facebook and Instagram. But yeah, I never take lightly who feels called to come into my space. It's a sacred space. I have a women's wisdom circle that I regularly run, and I feel like all I am here to do is share my truth and be a guide to help others access their own sovereignty. I'm no one's guru. I'm just a girl trying to get through the world and find that union with her beloved on the regular. So that's my passion, is helping others to find that gold inside and love themselves. And I will do that till my last dying breath. Mm-hmm. I will hold space for that.
Mm. So guys, if you are listening and not near a computer or anything, you can always come back over to empathicmasteryshow.com, check out the show notes. All of the links will be there as well. But really simply, cherieburton.com, and it's CherieBurton, just like the actor.com. Cherie, this has been such an exquisite, nourishing, gorgeous, glorious conversation. Thank you so much for really sharing your truth with us. And thank you so much for not looking good.
Yeah, you're welcome. And thank you for creating that emotional honesty where I felt like I could share what was real for me. Thank you.
Oh, I feel so honored and so grateful. It was such a privilege to hear your story. Thank you so much.
As we come to the end of this episode, I'd love to hear what you're taking from this show. Please jump over to empathicmasteryshow.com to leave your comments. In the show notes, you'll find a link to grab your copy of my Empathic Safety Guide, 3 Basics for Finding Calm in the Eye of the Storm. And while you're there, please subscribe and follow this show. And thank you for your help sharing this show with the people who need it. Please help me to spread the word and send this podcast to friends or family members who need support living as highly sensitive empathic people. Then join me again when the next Empathic Mastery show airs. Okay, one last time. Hop over to empathicmasteryshow.com for your Empathic Safety Guide. And until next show, shine on. We need you and your gifts here on this planet. So please don't judge your empathic rainbow by colorblind standards.